Okay, now let's try again and see if it wakes up. Hey, I'm Chris from Airwindows, and apparently this is working now, and I can do a live stream. It's a solid hour later than I usually do this, and today's been completely off the hook in a bunch of different ways, which are very cumbersome and difficult. But I'll tell you, I do have a neat thing to do today. Hey, before. If today wasn't so out of control, I would have been here earlier. But instead, I'm going to put off having dinner in order to be able to do a little streaming, because I do like to check in. This is my notion of what to do, is do a check-in live stream. So check it out. Here is what we can try to do today. And I'm going to see if I can get a little start on this and see where it takes us. Firstly, it needs to actually launch this. Wiki. There you go. We're working on Airwindows Meter again. That's currently what I'm working with on the main studio computer. And here is what it looks like. And heck, if I move the... and here is also what I'm doing. And I have a new idea. Macity is already on M1. Download the signed Mac builds. The signed Mac builds contain all of those. Consolidated would also include it. But you download the collection of signed AU or signed VST, and that will contain Macity built for M1. Also, all the other ones built for M1. So here is a thing that we're doing, namely, I have been working with this. And what you see here is the process that I'm under. You see underneath where I've been getting with it. I am analyzing all this stuff with the most recent version. This is the most recent version. You see a bunch of different changes. I feel like once I get this latest batch analyzed, I'm going to just put it out at that point. Perhaps not this coming weekend. I should put an audio plugin for coming weekend, but maybe the following one might be worth it, because this is an update and no mistake, but we're going to immediately change this as soon as we start working on it. It's going to immediately become something else. What you see here is hit record meter. This stuff is the same. This stuff is the same. There's better labeling for what everything does. It says things like, with the dots, blue is the projection of peak, red is brighter, green is darker. The reason the colors are kind of different is because I rewired everything in order to try to make it not draw these little vertical lines here. There's a glitch that I have still not been able to fix. But you see it draws a color now. This is your hit record color. And it's also doing a bunch of other analysis here. These bits of the meter are the same, but what it does with it is a whole other story. We've got a measurement for sonority, blue density. That's the same as the score for the very first version of meter. We've got novelty. That's blue range. That is the width that the dots take up on this screen. I'm describing it so that you can kind of understand what it actually does. Hype is sonority plus novelty minus RMS. So it's either of these. It's either lots of loudness up here, and it's not RMS loudness, it's peak loudness, or lots of novelty, or both, but they have to happen without RMS volume. That gets subtracted, and that's the height value. I've now got that explained a little tiny bit. And then we take the height value and subtract whether the tonal balance is off. And this is the hit record tonal balance. You've got a bright, a sonority, and a dark, and you've got a percentage score like the other three at the top. It's more or less gearing towards your classic super good production stuff. Like I particularly dialed it in around Back in Black, because nobody complains about the production of Back in Black. It's pretty much beyond fault as far as like, oh, is it too bright? Is it too dark? It's like, no, it's got everything. And this, compensated by this, gives you the letters. And we are now running this, and it has just finished its little analysis. You see that it's drawing a color? It's drawing a color based on all of this, and that's also letting you adjust the tonal balance number is how closely that zeroes in on your super awesome hit record style tone. Again, it's going to be kind of 80s, but not aggressively 80s. Like Back in Black will do that pretty successfully. Muttlange on Def Leppard records is going to be a little brighter. Something like In Excess is going to be a little brighter. Something like Bruce Springsteen's Born in the US album is going to be a lot brighter. Wham is going to, well, we can find out, but we're not necessarily getting hung up on this. We're just doing some measurements. That's what I started off doing, but we have something to do with my brief little stream before dinner. That dinner is being delayed in order to account for it. And see, that was just a DA, so we're going to rate it like that. Once I've finished with the top 10 hits, I'm going to do the top 25 hits, which are these ones. And here's what I've got so far. What the current measurement likes: Aerosmith, Walk This Way, Creedence, couple of tracks by Creedence, a Foreigner track, Flashdance, two J. Giles Band hits that are very like early 80s high energy stuff, a Peter Gabriel track, Styx, Talking Heads, The Fix. Again, that's the one I was thinking of, that they're a little brighter. Another Creedence, Foreigner, Peter Gabriel. We start slipping off of the double A track, but you notice something interesting. As we go downwards, we start getting, I think I'm going to probably start calling it peak music. At this point, Journey is all the way up at AF. It's not penalized for being a little darker, a little mellower, a little more dynamic. It's really balancing these things out a lot better than it ever used to, and I'm pretty pleased about where that's shaping up. Again, we got some other Duran Duran up here, Elton John, Chic, Le Freak is BC, so it's still pushing the score a little bit. My purpose for doing this, and it's going to include doing the top 25, is I need to run a bunch of stuff through here because I've repeatedly done like hundreds of tracks, including all manner of non-hit tracks, and then tried to rate them and adjusted the algorithm. This time, what I'm going to do is measure only the hit records and none of the non-hits, then analyze what it tells me, and try to come up with descriptions for what each of these levels are like, because you should be able to aim for levels and dial it in to produce the desired result. Like these A-level one, the J. Giles Band is very high energy. Foreigner tries to be very high energy. The Creedence, Aerosmith, like that. Some of this stuff, like the high B tier, it's a little bit more open and spacious. It's not as exhausting. And then we continue, and we start seeing stuff like, I think this Stevie Wonder track is in exactly the right place. Sir Duke is rating CC. That means it's not like exhausting or harrowing. The energy level is not unpleasant. Again, at this point, even though Every Breath You Take or King of Pain are very quiet compared to some of these other ones, they're being rated as CE. They're very sedate. They are kind of chill. The energy coming out of them is not exhausting, harrowing, demanding. Funny, interesting thing there. And it's not going to be... Okay, so you might be expecting certain things out of this. In particular, I think I had... I might have done a measurement here. I tried to dial in... When I go to rate AC/DC, which I think is in the category of you can't play this, and I dialed it in so that Back in Black hit AF. Not higher, but no lower. It's that level of energy is not quite off the top of the charts, but it is pushed hard enough. And when I measured this hit, Debbie Boone, You Light Up My Life, legit hit a AA rating. You may ask how on earth that could possibly happen, and I'll tell you. It's because it's a vocal performance with sonority and projection. And the way that the novelty meter works, the way that it gives and takes, it kind of wants a ebb and flow that is kind of like breathing. That fits with largely an a cappella with backing orchestra performance. And this was, of course, a massive smash #1 hit in its day. Also, you'll notice that Born to Be Wild ain't far behind. The reason those are there is because I had actually made videos of both of them. And we got a lot of other stuff to measure as well. Once I finish with those ones up there, I got these ones here to measure, which are all flagged. You can't play this on YouTube directly, but I do still get to measure them, and they were all top 10. And I'm measuring all the top 10 so that I can evaluate what these intensity levels are and then label it. So rather than just giving a letter grade, it gives a letter grade that tells you what the desired energy level is. Something like, for instance, Don't Fear the Reaper, that is not an AA energy level. Cheap Trick, I Want You to Want Me off of At Budokan, not a AA energy level. On the other hand, Walk This Way is a AA energy level and shows up as such. Some of the Creedence shows up several times here, and it shows up again as AB. These are very high energy level, even though they're darker, even though they're older. Sledgehammer, very high energy level. So Karma Chameleon by Culture Club is a very high energy level, as is the so far highest Men at Work track, Who Can It Be Now? Turned out to be a higher energy level than Down Under, which is BC. And I think that's pretty legit because I know both of those songs. This is all about target energy level. You should be able to reach up to this point, but if you're aiming for a particular effect, you don't go beyond that point. You just get the other parts of the measurement working properly. Like, for instance, I will continue for one more track before going into coding. Here's a Tom Petty track. This is Don't Do Me Like That. In fact, I will have it play little bursts of the music over my speakers. I have to play it first, though. So here's Tom Petty. This is the track Don't Do Me Like That. I could probably post this. I'm just not playing it through all the way. And what we see is that the loudness is not super loud, although it is making peaks go up here. The brightness is getting a decent value. See, it's like 22 bright, 12 dark. a lot of sonority. It's zeroing in on, see this green color? A slightly bluer version of this green color is pretty close to ideal for hit record tone. The balance. I think the Jumpin' Jack Flash there, that is largely because it's an older track. It's off of one of the compilation records. I bet if I was able to find a single of it, it would kick a little harder. But a lot of the Rolling Stones were dark, and the Rolling Stones were not like the Dead Kennedys. They were just not. The Rolling Stones are more like a blues band. Blues bands aren't necessarily tearing your head off. They're not a punk band. But Shattered will go pretty high. But Jumpin' Jack Flash, that's a groove. That's targeting groove. You could probably boost it a little bit to make it jump out. So here's Don't Do Me Like That. The brightness is okay. We've got up to BB rating. Zero cross is lowest frequency without other sound interfering. See, I've tried to label everything in the interface so you can see what it says. And then the lines. Here's why I'm doing a little hacking on this today. And we'll see how far we get. I think I have Baker's Banquet scores higher. Baker's Banquet is a little brighter. I don't know how much of that I've got handy. We're not going to simply only measure stuff. But yeah, it's like hit record, hype, and hitliness measurement. And I've even explained that part. It wasn't really properly explained before. So the blue dots, those are sonority. It's the projection of peaks, ones that are not too bright and not too dark. The sonority measurement, which was the very first label, the very first meter, only gave you sonority as a score. That's the density of these peaks. Then the current one that's out there, I think, is doing novelty and hype, but it's not really measuring them as well. And novelty is unchanged. Novelty is how much this fluctuates. Is it all sitting in the same space, or does it bounce around? And having a wider, like, blue range, this is what you would call range. It's going up to the top, and it's going down to around here. The wider range you cover, the more novelty there is, but the less sonority there is. And hype, which is the blue line, and which is, I think, it might be all of the letter grade at this moment. This is the new version. You see, you don't have this yet. Hype is sonority and novelty minus RMS loudness. So it's just how much of this do you still have if you've taken the actual RMS loudness away? And that's what gives you that. And it's just dialed in to where it's producing like reasonable results. And let's see, that was BA. So I'm going to go and label that now. And I think that's fair. The amount of energy coming off of that track is legit up there. It's like right on the edge of AF. It's about the same amount of energy coming off of Back on the Chain Gang, or Bruce Springsteen's Dancing in the Dark, or Rolling Stone's Satisfaction for that matter. Stevie Wonder is actually pretty high energy, but those are all about the same amount of energy level coming off of the track. You start pushing it. See, here's a Rolling Stones that is hotter. It's Beast of Burden. And we start pushing it up to here, and things start getting hypier. Like Talking Heads, Burning Down the House. That is very, very hypey and intense. That's what we're trying to do with this. And it's sorting it out so that it's deciding that things like The Police is King of Pain. So that's very bright. That's very sparkly. The sounds of it seem very much like, wow, the production, oh, that's very impressive. But the energy coming off of King of Pain is not nearly as hypey as some of those ones showing up much higher. Similarly, you go even lower, Christopher Cross, Sailing. This, no matter what its tones are like, should not be coming across as super high energy when, oh, I'll be releasing it soon enough. And trying to figure out some of these things. Here's another example. This Sting track is very low hype. It's all very chill, even though it's bright and glittery. Pink Floyd, very bassy, very non-hypey. James Taylor, again, that jumping jack flash is dark as anything. And these Marvin Gaye tracks are kind of dark too. And we're going to measure all these things and see how they, so that I can put a label. Rather than just BA, it needs to be saying BA smooth energy or something. I'm probably going to divvy it up so that I have a word for AA through AC, and then AD through AF is another word, BA through BC is another word, so on and so forth. And they need to be desirable words. So if you go like grooving, oh, I want to target grooving. Let me adjust my song so that it's more grooving. And then you pick the right one, like say B's, well, how about Stevie Wonder, Low B, Boogie on Reggae Woman. If you go, this should be grooving, it should flow smoothly, it should not be choppy or sound as if the energy is hard to manage because you got to relax into it. You'd be targeting that. You'd be balancing things around so that you have the desired amount. Like if you want it to be louder and more intense, you dial up the peak loudness a little bit so that it projects more, but you balance it out so that it's not too choppy, so that it's not making the number be like, okay, AA, it's bursting out all over the seams. Again, Doobie Brothers, What a Fool Believes. That's not supposed to be freaking out with too much energy. It's supposed to be chill. You want it to feel chill. Here's a Bruce Springsteen song that's meant to sound chill. Glory Days. That's not supposed to be freaking out. It's not supposed to be a punk rock track. Sultans of Swing. You'd think that Aerosmith Dream On would be higher because of the high-pitched singing in the very end of it, but most of it is flowing and very chill. Bruce Springsteen's I'm on Fire, which sometimes I've had a rating way lower than this, is meant to flow smoothly. So you aim it to like low C tier because it's supposed to flow smoothly but still have energy to it. Same with Every Breath You Take, Every Little Thing She Does Is Magic, King of Pain, Wrapped Around Your Finger, a whole batch of like relatively late, very Sting-oriented songs that are specifically tailoring like the, here's Sing Again with Fortress Around Your Heart. He had a predilection for chill tunes that early Police didn't always manage. So here's what we're going to do. I'm going to move this out of the way for the moment while still being able to see chat. I have had a request that I'm going to try to honor. Let's see whether we can do that. I was asked to be able to resize this like crazy. Unfortunately, I can't really do that. What I've got is horizontally, I can resize it kinda. You start losing some of the information, but you can get it a little bit narrower and it'll still work, including my additional documentation here. And that the normal width, like I've got it stretched out so that if you stretch it even farther, I'm doing basically one-to-one dot drawing here. But I was asked to make it fit. And what I've got here, although I've got it so that you can move it around like this, it's taking up more of the screen than some people have available. It's too big. So I was asked, can I make it 25% or 50%? And I don't have any good way of rescaling it without screwing up all the dots. But that person also suggested Also, can the slew and the zero cross meters be half the height? And I went, because see, I can't make the peak meter be half the height. It's sort of too densely packed already. And this labeling, I can already not fit the minus 36 dB marking, this additional gray line there, because the lettering won't allow me to. If I try to make that more smushed, it'll ruin the labeling. But this doesn't have any labeling. And this, the labeling, the 200 hertz line and the 40 hertz line, and the 20 hertz is the bottom. Well, there's lots of room there. This could easily be half the height. And you know, if it was half the height, you'd be able to read the colors a little bit more easily because they would be more mushed together. So what I could do is try to make the slew meter and the zero cross meter exactly half this tall, meaning that here would be our peaks, and then it would be slew, zero cross, and then this chart, these lines. And everything needs to be neatly chopped in half, which I can probably just do mathematically. I will probably have to dial in where the 200 hertz and 40 hertz lines go, which I do by playing those tones on a wave file, and it'll draw a little line here. Like I can demonstrate that even just while I talk. Here, let's here is something called long sine. So if I play this, that is not 40 hertz. I think it's probably 50. And you can see that it's drawing a line. If I do a 40 hertz tone, it will draw a line exactly where this line is supposed to be. And then you can sort out like where the scaling of this goes. And again, if I do a 200 hertz tone, it'll draw it exactly where this line is supposed to be. Since it's a tone, the slew is exactly the same. The loudness was exactly 6 dB. All of that is pretty much under control, but there's the question is, can I, in maybe the 20 minutes, because I should really go and make dinner at some point, I realized that I failed to arrange for streaming early enough, and so I'm not going to screw myself up too hard by skipping dinner. That seems bad. But what I will do is either do this or get a start on it. So here's where this goes. We've got multiple borders going on. This goes from 0 to 200. That means border with slew meter stays at 200. Border with zero cross meter will become 300 instead of 400. And 20 hertz markings becomes the bottom edge of the zero cross meter. So in theory, that would have been 600, and it would turn into 400. $393. So now we're drawing some lines, and we go through and have a look at, we're not actually moving any of the dots yet, but we're moving this other stuff, and we're going to see where it goes. By the way, I'm keeping a bit of an eye on chat. You folks are talking about like Yellow Submarine, Let It Be, and Abbey Road. Oh yeah, no, those were done exclusively in stereo. In fact, Sgt. Pepper's was the first Beatles album that was done first in stereo. Everything before then was mixed in mono, and then engineers did the stereo version for it. Noel and I will be doing that, but I have to work it out first, because what I'm doing is looking at this. I'm taking only hit records and trying to sort them into these categories, at which point I will figure out what level AA to, for instance, AC feels like to me. And then I will draw the description, because again, it's like energy level, but it's not specifically loudness. It's not, there's a bunch of different things going on here. For instance, Come Sail Away is fairly loud. Foreigner's Hot-Blooded is moderately loud. Sledgehammer, that's fairly loud. Men at Work, Who Can It Be Now is relatively quiet, but it's got loads of energy going on. It's all peak happy. So it's, yeah, and I haven't got the foggiest idea. YouTube is kind of crazy. I'm going to continue trying to sort this stuff out now. And what's for dinner tonight? I'm going to make something with rice and chicken breast and stir fry it. It's Tuesdays and Thursdays that I like to make taco nights. So that's not streaming night anymore. So let's see. Where were we at? We have just adjusted this so that the slew meter things, or at least some of them, we're gonna see whether the lines and texts are moved correctly. So slew over slew is not going to be 380. It's going to be 280. The slew stuff moves, the bottom edge of the slew stuff moves up by 100. Then the top edge of the zero cross stuff moves up by 100. See, top edge being this label, which goes on the top edge of that. These aren't going to be correct at all, so I'm going to leave them alone for the moment. I don't think why am I even drawing this? I don't think it works. It doesn't do anything, or does it? Pretty sure that's gonna end up being like border with zero cross meter or something. So I might as well move this into the general direction, but 200 hertz, it will go up by 248 and 320s. Is that right? Probably not. Yeah, so my problem here is I have taken something that's 200 pixels tall, changed it to 100 pixel tall, at which point these don't actually, they're going to be in the 200 something realm, but exactly where they're going to be is unsure, so we'll guess. And they'll at least be in the right general vicinity. Call it 240 and 280. We're not actually drawing a 20 hertz line because that is actually another border. See, that became 393. I don't know why I even had that here again. That was not proving useful. I think I'm drawing on top of it with something. Well, let's build it and see what it does. This is not going to move any of the dots, but it is going to move all of the borders and lines. Build. And it should build just fine. So now what we'll do is we'll open up a track. This is Tommy Two-Tone. Everything is going to work properly, except that now everything's been moved around. Up and lines, blue, sonority, red, novelty, green, hype is not in the right place. Nor are these. This one needs to be moved also. And oh, look at that. 200 hertz is completely in the wrong place. That belongs in the zero cross meter. Both of these belong in the zero cross meter. Okay, let's jump in. We're going to call it 340 and 380. That wasn't the right place at all. And then this, oh, I see. So what was the original location for 575? Is it 375 or 275? Probably 375. Okay, let's see what that looks like now. I should be able to tell at a glance whether I've got it in roughly the right place because I've moved some of these lines, I've moved some of these things. And it might not be perfect, but it should give me a rough idea of whether I've got all the lines and lettering moved right. These have not actually been readjusted anymore, so this needs to be moved to where overslew lives. Also, 40 Hertz is not high enough. But this is more or less what I'm shooting for. See, we've got this label here. This is not moved, so that's the same. This is not moved, so that's the same. Here's the slew meter. These, slew and overslew, and this bit are correctly labeled. And zero cross lowest frequency, that's correct. The lines representing what the chart's going to do, that's correct. These lines are not remotely correct. So I'll deal with that in a bit. I've moved the labels, I haven't moved the lines to represent what they're supposed to do. So this is where the zero cross lines used to be. Like this is going to be possibly 20 kilohertz. Yeah, probably. And then this is 2 kilohertz, 200 hertz, and 40 because I just deleted the 20. And they need to be moved. It's not one of the black lines, it's the gray lines. Here they are. They live up here. So let's see. And some of this stuff is not correctly labeled, but let's see. Slew got half as tall, meaning that the zero cost stuff, well, let's see. Overslew 280, so the very top one, that's going to be 303, 315. So if I do that, I've just moved some of these things, but not correctly, not remotely correctly. So what I've done there is those lines I talked about, they've just moved up to where the zero cross meter starts, but they need to take up half the space. Now, I didn't do that for 240 hertz markings, but I probably can do this with a calculator and figure it out. So the way it's going to work is it starts at this point, which is a fixed point, and then plus that is going to be exactly half the spacing that it started with. If that works, I'll be able to scale the drawing of the dots to start at a slightly offset amount, like 100 less, and then be half the height, and it'll line up with the dots exactly. So let's see what we can make happen here. We're starting here. So we start at 300. And then we're dividing the other bit by half. So half of 3, we're going to call that 1. It's probably not going to signify anything. I'm going to leave it there just to sort of have it there. Won't matter Not going to register. Half of 15, well, half of 14 is 7. Half of 58, exactly 29. So that would be exactly 329. And then half of 137, because 300 plus 137 becomes 437. So 137 divided by 2, we'll call it 68. And if that worked, those markings are now going to be sitting. Oh, and we might even be able to get a little bit funky here. Looks like my letters are exactly 10 pixels higher than the marking that it goes along to. Like 12 dB marking at 100, the dash on the 12 dB, if you do 90, it lines up perfectly. So I should be able to do that with these, and it might actually work first time. That would be cool. I'd like that. Let's see if it works. So 200 hertz, there's one we want. So instead of 329, we need to be 10 pixels up. It'll start at 319. And then the 40 hertz, 368, not 380. But moving it 10 pixels up makes it 358. Not G8, what am I doing? 358. And I don't know if I have that. Am I drawing any text here at 375? Probably not. No, I guess not. I feel as if that was drawing a little bit low. Let me tweak this while I'm at it and see whether it looks nice. Oh, here's the border. So if it's 8373, it's 18 points. So 20 up from this border, which is drawn in black, probably makes it line up nicely. Also, while we're at it, let's see if we can't update these. This gets drawn here too. We draw hype score at 178. That's fine. But then text score, that's not going to be 380. Let's call it 280, but what would it really be? What's closest to 280? Oh, no, 280 is where you would draw it if you drew it on the overslew thing. So that would be in the same location. Let's see whether it worked. If this works, I can start working out how to do the dots. And then I will have done a major update on the size of the meter in roughly half an hour. That'll be cool. Let's see how we do. And then during the next couple of days, say, lovely. Now, notice when we run this, all of our dots are still being drawn in the wrong place. These ones need to draw up here. These ones need to draw up here, and this entire area needs to scooch up to this edge, and then I need to set the size of the window to be more appropriate for this. And that'll be fine, but this is already starting to look correct. Let's do them dots. Dot time. Everything else is done. We do not need to update. We need to update the slew dots. So let's go and find everywhere that we're doing those. And then we have zero cross dots, and that's even different from that. So peak dots. 200 minus peak, 200 minus peak. That's correct. And then oh, here we go. I see how this is going to work. Slew dots are 400 minus slew. Yeah, I'm not actually going to make it resizable. Believe me, I'm going to have stuff that's resizable coming, but this one's just not going to be comfortable to do. Or if I get it all nailed into this one little, I might be able to set it up so that you just make it look ugly by resizing it. Resize the picture. That would be unpleasant, but it would work. Right now, what I've got is it keeps it looking nice, but if you scroll it horizontally, and I think I've got it so it'll go up to 2000 before it starts blanking off the edge of it. You can scroll it in to make it narrower, and it will just cycle faster, but it'll be doing the same information. It'll just be looping it a little more often, but no other changes. So here's what we've got. This is drawing all the slew and all the zero cross, and they're all based off of 400. So, in fact, we can even update that, I think, because the last time I checked, it was not drawing this perfectly for me. It was leaving a little extra space. And I've just removed a parenthesis that needed to be there. There we go. So now that we've got this sorted, here's where the dots are being drawn. We're going to keep the size of the dot the same. Or we could even jump it upwards to 3, but let's see what this does first. But it needs to be offset from a different position. See, the color, this reference to slew was not actually drawing a slew dot. Instead, it's working out what color to make it. And then we keep the color for all the other dots. But here's where we start getting something happening. So the question becomes, can we just change all these 400s to 300s? We're going to see what that does. It's not going to be perfect, but it's a start. And there's another set of 400 turning to 300. There's multiple 300s. There's the final one. So if this worked, it's going to center them around the correct place, but they are going to be the wrong scaling. They need to be half the scaling. So we're going to test that out. We're going to see what it does, and presumably what it's going to do. I'm probably going to go a little bit past 6 for this, but I want to let's get to where we see the result, because that'll be cool. We are now basing it off of the correct place, but this slew is going to start overlapping here. It's going up twice as high as it should. And the zero cross is going down twice as far as it should, because it is twice as tall as it's supposed to be. So there's a quick way to deal with that. We're going to go and find everywhere that we do that and exactly have them. Here's where we start. Everywhere it says 300, we have to keep the square root the same, so I'm going to add another parenthesis so that I can be sure to do it right. Where is my cursor? I'm just going to undo that. I don't know where my cursor is, and I can't find it now. So 300 minus that, and interesting. Okay. No, that's still correct. What's this? If slew is larger than 197, I think this might just be the overslew indication. Yeah, I think that is. So with this, if the overslew indication does this, and I only change the height of it this much, the size of it doesn't change, and so it will start, rather than going up from the bottom edge, it will be going from both directions because it'll be twice as tall as it was, but start from the same place. So we are going to duplicate, and we're going to also add 0.5f because we're using floating point numbers, and we might as well not start them all. Oh, hello, what are you doing now? Ah, I've got it in the wrong place. Cut. Paste. We're multiplying the square root by 0.5, but then the result of that becomes an integer. Now it's not complaining about the wrong kind of thing. So now let's do the same thing on the right channel, which is going to be over here somewhere. Let's see. Namely, right here. And ooh, that is a mistake. It didn't give me an error, but this definitely needs to divide this part by 0.5, not the 300. That would have screwed everything up. I would have been able to figure it out, but I caught that one before it bugged me. Let's find the other one. Slew larger than 197. So we're putting this multiplied by 0.5 right next to square root slew r minus 197. And we're going to make another parenthesis just so that it sort of knows what it's doing. And tuck in that 0.5 there as well. Now that overslew indicator ought to work correctly. So here's where we take this a little farther. 300 minus slew, just a plain dot. Times 0.5. Same with this one. And I'm putting the parentheses in just so that I can multiply by a floating point number and then still be able to turn it to an integer. And then lastly here, looks like it's going to be exactly the same thing, and I think I can leave dot size alone. So same deal, no actual change there. Same deal here. Okay, I just told it to build. That's fine, I'm not quite done. I'll tell it to build again in a minute. Drawing the slew dots, and then here is our zero cross dots. Lots of them will stay basically the same. But there's the bit that needs to change. This, oh, hi, I've got that parenthesis in the wrong place. I don't want to scale the 300 back. The 300's fine. I want to scale meter 0 back. It's 300 plus meter 0 has to be exactly half. Like this. And like this. Now let's build it. Now let's build it and see. The dot should be fixed, and the area with the that other area that I have to move up but probably don't need to scale because I'm not changing the size of it. I'm leaving it the same size, but I'm moving it up. I'm going to need to move that, but the dots should be fixed now. I'll tell you, if I get this nailed, I'm going to go, hooray, victory, and then end the stream. Because that'll be fun and exciting. But it's not going to be quite yet. It's not going to be this time. And check it out. We've got Tommy Two-Tone, as heard here. And I see an issue here. I don't know quite what's happening, but we are drawing slew and peaks in the same place. But zero cross is basically okay. It's not perfect, but it's basically okay. See, it's taking up less space. This has to be moved up, but other than that, it seems fine. Zero cross could scooch up a little more than this, although I think some of these lines down here are sub 20 hertz, so we don't care about those that much. Although I might be clipping them to that. So yeah, these two things are overlaid on top of each other. That's not right. And I have a guess as to why. I know exactly why. Check it out. Do you see the bug? Because I just saw the bug. This stuff that I'm doing, I think I'm doing the clip, the overclip. Well, hang on. I can find out right away. If we've got stuff that does massive overclip, I think. No, here it is. Here's some Skrillex. We maybe don't want to listen to this, but it will certainly show me whether the overclip is in the right place or not. So, my slew stuff is being driven up here, is being drawn up here. The overslew stuff should still show up down here, if I'm correct. Let's find out. Bingo. So clip's fine. Zero cross has not actually gone very low, but I think maybe this doesn't. I'm not entirely sure. I feel like maybe it's too loud to go into deep bass properly. And then, of course, we've clipped it out completely. But the bit where it was drawing overslew, it's drawing the overslew in the right place. It's drawing the slew in completely the wrong place. Let's investigate why. When I was setting up the zero cross stuff, I made a point of saying 300 plus, and then this is the part that needs to be multiplied by 0.5, because if I multiplied the 300 by 0.5, we're starting it in the middle of the peak meter. It needs to start at an unscaled 300. Look at what we've got up here. We're scaling the 300 by slew R. That is not the correct answer. So I got to look through here a little bit. I feel like I could be... No, we're probably fine. I'm trying to figure out whether I want the overslew to be in that size or not. Hey, beans, beef, broccoli. You didn't hear the bro step. Don't worry about it. I just needed to pick something that I knew was going to overslew. And that certainly qualifies it beyond overslews. So, what do we do to make this work? We scale only slew L and only slew R. We do not scale the 300. We need that to be like this, where it is. It doesn't get changed. There's your problem. And then we're going to move that 0.5 inside this part of the equation. So we've got several of these to do. This one's actually fine already. The overslew stuff starts in the right place. But these get deleted off of there and pasted in here. Because we are starting it in the correct place this time. 1, 2. And now the height of what we're drawing is half as high, but and I'm wondering whether I can deal with the zero across any better. What am I doing with meter 0? Am I doing anything useful? I know I have some vinyl records with a whole bunch of wow and low frequency rumble that I could investigate, but maybe that's not something to do right now. One thing I can do, however, if I feel that it's a little bit low, is 300. Start it a little higher. Now the meter, the zero crosses are starting a little bit higher. Yeah, I actually got a tiny mono speaker, exactly the one that Venus Theory made a video about, because I could, because it was cheap and available, and I was able to find that exact one, because I could tell from hearing it that it was doing nothing to try to make the sound better. So it was effectively the same as a phone. And let's see. So we'll build that. Also, while I'm at it, maybe it would be fun to look for some of these. Where do these need to start in order to be correct? Because here's our 3 lines. So if they moved up 200, would that be right? It sounds about right. And then 5 for 394, move that up by 200 as well. Let's build it and see what we got. Oh, that's cool. Skrillex giving Fortet some. Fortet has recently posted a live set in London somewhere, and that was very cool. That was fun. Now, what have we here? Have we got this completely solved? Maybe. We'll find out. Back to Tommy Two-Tone, and it's hidden, and we are drawing everything pretty much exactly right, I think. Nice. I think we might even have the 200 hertz and 40 hertz stuff done correctly, although I'm not absolutely certain. Easy way to find out. But yeah, all I have to do, this needs to be changed as well. This line only needs to go up to here, so I can deal with that. It's currently scaled to the height of the window, which is not actually useful. But we're going to want to have the whole thing be about this big, and this will be the new size of it. And this is now drawing our slew meter and our zero cross meter in a slightly compressed way that makes them show up a little more colorfully, I think. And you can still basically make out the information, I feel. I don't think it's too far off as far as that's concerned. But this is what I was requested for. And in a lot of ways, I think that's working out just fine. Yeah, we've got a 2K, we've got a 200 hertz, we've got a 40 hertz. We've also got a 20K, but that's useless, so I'm going to make that not draw. So we are about halfway through Tommy Two-Tone. I'm going to put the content hide on. We're going to play some little tiny bursts of it. It'll get stuck in your brain even in 1 second chunks. And I will get a accurate evaluation because I have not changed any of the analysis. Instead, I've only changed the rendering. And finally, I guess the next thing to do would be to adjust the default window size, because that's the final bit of the puzzle there. But yeah, and you see the little dots here is a rendering glitch that I have not yet solved. I would really like to. I have at least made it not show a bunch of heavy white lines in the initial rendering by drawing these twice as wide, but it's still failing to draw every line. These lines always did do that, in fact. I don't know whether it's simply because I'm drawing them in the wrong place. I don't know another place I can draw them. Ooh, bobcats. Yeah, I entirely endorse bobcats as far as knowing how stuff works. He would probably enjoy this work. He understands the value of peak energy. But remember, headroom is not just to have headroom. Headroom is to do this with. Fill the headroom with active peaks that sound good and are the correct kind of peak that you want. That's what headroom is for, and this is what the rest of the sound is for, is getting down quiet again. But this is, you fill the headroom area with stuff at all times. You see, it's active. There's constantly something happening. It's not just sitting there being quiet until the fade. When it's the fade, it's sitting there being quiet. But when the music is going, you've got stuff happening up there. And yeah, this is coming along well other than these glitches. And I'm sick and tired of these glitches, but what am I going to do? So I've got a rating for Tommy Two-Tone's Jenny. It is BD. I will file that away. Next one is going to be U2. And now I'm going to jump in here and find where we define the window size, which I think is like plugin editor or something. Yeah, because plugin processor is the audio code. And our audio code measures stuff. Like here's the RMS size, which tracks with sample rate and so on. But it doesn't actually change the audio, although we do have double processing, which also does not change the audio. But I made sure that the double processing passed through doubles without touching them, because otherwise it would be stuck at 32-bit, and I'd rather not do that. So plugin editor, I feel, is where I'm going to find the window size. And it's not going to be in the header file. It's going to be in here. So let's see. I have got the size set to 1280 by 720 by default. Maybe let's... So the constrainer doesn't actually work. This is one of the things I don't like about Juice very much, is that it won't really do that properly. The aspect ratio stuff screws you up. I can set resize limits, and I think our default size is 1280 by 720. So tell you what, let's resize everything to still be the same aspect ratio so that I can make videos out of it, and it'll fit basically right, and the dots will be a better size on the screen. So let's see what we can do here. Firstly, we're going to go to 520. 765. That ought to do it. then we're going to make this calculation be the same as the initial size, but then we're going to change the width by default. So it defaults to a smaller window that wraps a little bit sooner. I think that is still going to be fine, but we'll find out. So 11280 divided by 720 times 520, 924 or 925 I could make it. Let's see. Whether this is still an appropriate size. We are now making the size be forced to be a smaller size, and it's going to instantiate as a smaller meter, but it will fit vertically the correct way. And you'd be able to widen it up to 2000 and presumably not farther, but I think that the program I'm using doesn't actually honor resize limits, so it basically just screws it up. It doesn't honor resize limits properly. Juice kind of does that. That's why some of the other stuff I'm working on in Juice, I don't bother with any of this, and I just try to make it work with whatever crazy size you come up with, which is very difficult. But for this, that is set up to go to a max of 2000 width. The rest of it works normally at all sizes. I believe the drawing of it is restricted. The moving line well, now hang on a second. If this dot starts at 394, see across and then down. It starts at 394 and goes 73. Then this moving line needs to go to 394. And it doesn't need to go any farther than that, so that'll be fine. Let's see whether I'm correct. And let's skip ahead to the only top 10 Van Halen hit I was able to find, 1984/Jump. Let's see if the meter looks nice. Here we are. How's this look? Is this more manageable? I know that if I make a video of it and I blow that up to full size, it's going to be, all the lettering is very large. And let's see what we got here. Oh, I see a problem. I've got a little blank spot in here that doesn't need to be there. So I feel maybe this is time for a sudden change. Wonder how big that was. Which unfortunately would require is my correct size 500? That'd be a little weird, but not impossible. Hang on, I should be able to figure this out. I've got that in other measurements. Okay, so here is, around here somewhere is where we're drawing. Okay, so we're 465. There we go. So here's where we're drawing those lines. And they're starting from 465 and going up. In other words, the y is becoming smaller. This is where our area is being drawn. So that's 394 and it's 73 tall, and it's always going to be the same. So that's 467. The lines are starting at 465. Why don't I start that a little bit lower? I feel like it's overlapping the edge a little bit. If it's 399, so what do we got here? If that goes to exactly 500, or 499 technically, 498, let's see what that does. Also, I've got something, oh, nope, that's actually going to be fine. That's doing get width and get height. This is a small highlight and shading around the actual window itself, but it is doing a pretty decent job of rendering that. So I needn't worry about that bit. 394, you say? Is this really starting at 394? Let's tell it to go to 399. I feel like 400 is one of my key lines here. And then 399, 299, we're getting very close to the very bottom edge. With this area, we can fill it in, meaning 500. So we don't actually want 465. Instead, we want like 497, which might mean that our scores don't go quite up to the top edge, but that's probably fine. Oh, bug. Don't want to do 4,979. So now we're starting at that point and moving upwards. Maybe that's even still too far. Let's go. Operculum, talk about it in stream. Then maybe even if I don't do it, somebody else will. Because there's other people here who do stuff. Now let's see what we've got. And let's see now. Yeah, so again, I am in fact saying peaks go up into the headroom. The headroom should be actively used with peaks at all times. You will see that in this stuff, but not all of it. For instance, I could bump over to the U2 track. See, with this one, the peaks don't go up into the headroom at all. The first minute or so is far from the top, and then during the body of the track, there's this one peak here and there that is actually full volume. So this is kind of like the Ace of Base CD that I've got, where it's using the full dynamic range and allowing single peaks to be the loudest thing in the track. Big old change there. So we're going to have a look at this and see if it looks right now. Up. I can start that a little higher. Or I can move this line down. That might be the better option. Because see, I'm making this commentary here. This is fine. But this line, which represents 20 hertz, that's going to be like this information down here, and the line does not line up with it correctly. But there is actually a way of telling that. And I'll show you what it is. New file. Audio, or effects rather. Sine. 20 hertz, 6 dB down. And we're going to insert 30 seconds of, hang on, I need to select this properly. Then same deal. Generate tones. Replace the selection. We'll test the 40 Hertz as well, see if that's correct. Oh, wait, no, that just replaced the selection. It's still the full length. So let's do it this way, because I've got enough time to register that. Here's the 40 Hertz, replace the selection. It's now 40 Hertz. And then I want to check the 200 Hertz as well. Generate tones. .200 Hertz. Now when I play this, big old line at 20 Hertz. That's definitely down there a little bit. Line at 40 Hertz, that looks about correct, but I could move the line up a hair, and then it would be more accurate. And then 200 Hertz, I can move that up a hair, and it would be more accurate. Also notice that the difference between these two caused a tiny bit of overslew. When I zoom in on the transition between these two, what I'm going to see is that it abruptly breaks between those two with a sharp line that is like a vertical line. So let's go in search of where that happened. So 20, 40, 200. Here is how you find out how stuff works. See where the meter says there's this little red dot, and then there is a little dot which is the overslew marking. All of a sudden that's there. Volume no different, but that, oh, I do not think Reaper sounds thin one bit. You got to use Reaper with the and see, here is where the overslew comes from. The overslew comes from snapping from this point to this point. We could even make the overslew bigger. Check this out. There. That is now a slew. That's a transition between these two parts. And we could even do the same thing with this transition in the opposite direction. So watch what happens when I run this through the meter. Scooch it back over here. So watch this. Oh, in the wrong place. Off you go. So 20 Hertz. Overslew when it transitions to that. See, there's the overslew. I should make it a larger overslew, honestly. I really should. I will. That probably doesn't need to be half the size. And then an overslew when it transitions to 200 Hertz. And that's because I made this switch from the one sine wave to the other sine wave a big vertical snap, which comes across as a slew, and it registers here. So let me see. So I was going to raise these. Let's raise them each by 1. And then I'm going to lower this by more than 1. Raise this by 1. Raise this by 1. This markings. Raise that by 1. 367, raise that by 1. That's probably enough. I'll test it again and find out. I did not save that, but I can rebuild it. And then the border with the 0 cross meter needs to scooch down a bit, doesn't it? Yes, it does. Ooh, here's where it is. Let's scooch it down this far, 399. Where do we start the other meter? Here's our lines, 496 and up. Here's their color making. When it says we make a big area just for the color story, we are drawing this. We are drawing it beginning at 399. So I guess that would make this other line be 398. Also, I'm going to reposition where we draw these, because I missed that at one point, because it wasn't in order. It's drawing from the top, and the slew meter, the zero cross meter, and then the 20 hertz is the border with, let's not call it border with zero cross meter. Color and let's build that and see what we get. And we're going to jump back to the Van Halen track and we're going to see whether it draws nicely. I'm not going to go later than 7. I have to eat dinner and I have to sleep. But let's see how nicely this... Oh, I can draw the lines down a little bit too, can't I? Let's do... Well, no, let's check it very briefly and then draw it. Okay, we're drawing the 20 hertz line, and there's a little space that's more than 1. That's probably 2. $396. Color story. 397, 398, and 399. It's drawing underneath my highlighting a little bit, but that's fine. Also, bear in mind, one of the things I'm trying to do with all of this is get you to a place where you can make stuff sound amazing with way fewer tracks. That's part of the secret of the classic album. The classic album, you don't necessarily do nearly as many tracks as you'd think. And we're not even talking old school back in the day. Oh, I wanted to move this lines, didn't I? Or did I? Well, this stuff is okay. This is probably fine. I'll do a quick little check. Yeah, that's fine too. Although I feel like, no, I still see the line. I still see the black line. So that's going to be fine. And I see this information here, which is our 20 hertz line. And I would like to draw this text a hair lower. So that's easily fixed. Let's draw it at 376. I am not sure if... No, I didn't have any. If there was another thing, like in this area, it would be 20 hertz drawn where this is. And there's no corresponding thing there. So it's not like, see, this is 200 for this, and then slew is in the same vertical location. 280 for overslew. Then this label is at 300. This on the other side of the window is at 300. It's in the same place, and so on. But there was nothing corresponding to this, which is probably why it's sitting apart from the other ones. And you know what? That probably got me there. Let's not do the Van Halen. Let's do a classic Wham track. Or no, even better. I'm going to be wanting to do this. Anybody watching, pick between Owner of a Lonely Heart and Legs. I'm going to end up doing both of them, but I'm going to do one of these before I finish streaming. And you can see what the new meter makes of it. I realize that there's not that many people watching, 16 people or so watching, but that's normal. So, yes or ZZ Top? Choose. I will end up doing both. The ZZ Top is a classic Terry Manning mix, and the Yes is a classic Trevor Horn production. So what you'll see with those, they're both going to go to a very high score. And then the Yes track is going to have huge amounts of hype, huge amounts of space in it. And then the ZZ Top track is going to have a bunch of space in it, but perhaps not quite as much. I called it ZZ Top first post saying ZZ Top, we're doing it. If I'm not mistaken, this top 10 hit also goes to like AA. And we will let it content peek through. And then I'll write down the score, and we'll go from and I'll go and make dinner. But yep, so this is the new change. We got hit record meter in a smaller size. It'll still fit in my window for doing videos about it. Just blow up the pixels a little bit larger, which is fine. Nothing wrong with that. And it now defaults to a much smaller size than it used to. So hopefully that will help with people who are having trouble fixing the meter on their screen. Because people wanted to be able to see this stuff, and it was occupying too much of the screen. Here's what we got from ZZ Top's Legs. Here's our peaks. Here's our slews. We're making lots of really giant blue spots everywhere because it's doing real well for projection. You can still basically, I was actually thinking about one final adjustment, and then I'll go back and do it. Remember how I said that when we're doing this, if slew is larger than 197, we do this, and we're adjusting this by a square root. Turns out when we make that even smaller, it's not helpful. So what we're going to do is our same calculation, but with this, we are not scaling this bit down. Which also means we don't need as many of these. We can come back to this. So there's our clip, and again, ooh, look at this. See, those functions are sitting, no scaling of that anymore. So it's being turned into an integer, but we're not dialing it back. Now what you see, and we saw tiny bits of this, is we're going to see the overslews, and they'll be a little bit more visible than they were. That's all, but it's enough. And width of 2, ooh, hello. Width of 2 and width of 1, that's not correct. That should be a width of 2. And that appears to be the fix. Okay, back into ZZ Top land. While we're at it, we're going to stretch it out to demonstrate the ability to resize. Here's our meter. And here is, again, it's not going to honor the limitations I put upon it. It turns out I can make it be squished. But it will honor this, and we can stretch it out this way. and it should be just hunky-dory and fine that way. So we will make it be the correct height, and off we go. I don't think I stretched it past 2000. I could be mistaken. If I stretch it past 2000, it will wrap at some point, and the rest of this will be blank over here. Over here. But you can basically pick your width as far as how wide you want the meter to go, and it'll adjust everything appropriately. So these are all not divided by 2, but they are the overslews. This vinyl record eliminator has its slews hot enough that some of them are making very tiny overslews. Here's our zero cross. I'm pretty sure I've got the frequencies dialed in correctly, and we're going to see whether it wraps or not, I guess. Yep. And we did not stretch it past, and see, our rating has already gone up to AF. Legs is a very strong top 10 hit, this one. It is a extremely intense sounding thing. I'll sneak the content ID in there so that you can hear little bits of it as it goes. You will also see the new color, the color information based on this. Again, if you're doing this in a DAW that honors the size restraints, it will clamp it to 200 or 2000 width, and it will clamp it to the height that it needs to be. Might be some fussing that I can continue to do on there just to make sure that it works properly, because I'm not sure if all of that is, we'll fool around a little bit with it, but this is enough for today. We have rearranged meter so that it behaves in a certain way, and it fits on the screen better. It should fit on normal people's screens just fine. In fact, you can resize it on the fly and make it as little as that, and it'll still be fully functional, although we have drawn AF over one of the lines of text, but that's fine. And you can still pretty much read all the information, although let's widen it just enough so that the AF fits. And again, this green color represents the sound that you're getting. If it gets brighter, it will lean more blue. If it gets much darker, it will be a red color. If it has a lot of hype, a lot of novelty, which is this red line, over the loudness, it'll be a bright. Let's do the Owner of a Lonely Heart 2, because that'll really illustrate this. It'll really illustrate this. So check this out. Here's what the color is supposed to let you do. You see that ZZ Top, it's a rock band, even if it has kind of electronic sounding percussion. And it's chugging along like this, and you see the color is like the color of a dollar bill. That's not, the darkness is not necessarily making it better. What that means is the loudness is stronger than the novelty. Blue sonority, red novelty, green hype. And so when the blue color goes above the red color, it gets darker. At one point I had a note saying like light green for pop hits and black for indie hits. So here's what that means. We're going to close this and note down the score that we got, which is AF. Boop. And remember this color. This was the color that ZZ Top was generating pretty consistently. Now we've reset it, and suddenly we're doing Yes, Owner of a Lonely Heart. Intro is kind of dark. Guitar, that's starting to be more of a blue color. And then watch what happens. Trevor Horn production kicks in. Trevor Horn production means much more headroom, much less density of the blue peaks are not as concentrated up here. They're all over the place. In the Bob Katz method, it would be like K36. There's just no RMS here at all. And that produces, the red line is higher than the blue line, and that makes this bright, bright green color. This is going to be the color of a pop hit, rather than a heavy rock or metal kind of thing. The higher if the blue one like starts crossing over the red one and going way farther than it, the color tone of this background color goes almost black. We'll probably see a little bit of that at some point, maybe in the guitar solo of this song. But when we're going along doing the pop hit type stuff, the color that we get here is this bright, bright spring green. But the thing is, that's being generated by the novelty. It's hard to keep that going. If you just have the same groove going, that novelty scale is going to go down. The reason we have so much novelty is this distribution of peaks up here where it's taking up such a wide space. If it all goes loud and starts only hanging out up here because it's gotten that much louder, novelty is going to go right down. In fact, we are seeing novelty go down at this point in the song. See, it's taking up less space. It's becoming darker because we're no longer having peaks this low. Instead, it's going louder, more intense, and the color is becoming darker, kind of like the ZZ Top track. And now we've gone so loud that the sonority is higher than novelty, right up here. And so the color went from light green down to nearly black, but the end result is fairly consistent. This tracks the sort of vibe of the song as it shifts and changes. And remember, this is not only brightness and darkness. Loudness and whatever. High frequencies and low frequencies get involved too. It is going bluer as the high frequency stuff in the guitar comes around. As the quiet bit comes in, it went redder, because the sparkliness, the cymbals and stuff stopped happening. So it turned red briefly. Well, you can... It depends. Like before, loudness will increase novelty if you haven't got anything way up here. You kind of always want to have stuff happening in the top 60B for like music in the modern world. We're not really doing stuff from back in the day when the dynamic range sat around being almost... I can play some Police tracks for you that will absolutely demonstrate that. Probably even have time to do that, because why not? I'm like screwing up my schedule completely anyway. And see, completely different color story, exactly the same rating. Although it might jump up in the very last bit. I will see whether it goes in the... If it jumps up in the fade, that's because that was already potential. But it might just stay the same. I tried to stop it from bouncing around in the fade. That seemed like not correct. So I've been struggling with that. And see, as it goes into the fade, it went brighter. Because we got a little surface noise. It faded into sort of brightness. So the brightness is represented by this blue color. That rates as AF. So this is the new meter. Let's do a wham track. That's in my category of stuff that I need to evaluate. And in this one, guess what this is going to do? It's going to be on the brighter side. Wham was doing like that Dolby trick where stuff is extra compressed and bright. We're still doing content hiding. It started out with a little bit of darkness right here. That brown color represents that. But you'll notice it's still your hit record green, but it's going a little bluer. It'll tend to go a little bit bluer because it's very, 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 very bright. Although since it's the doubly trick, it's compressed bright, it's not actually doing overslews. These red dots in the sleuthing are not actually pushing farther. And again, we've got another AF, although it might go higher than that before it's done. And again, the picture of the bright poppy hit, the red line is over the blue line. The picture of a aggressive, intense rock style or metal style sound might very well be blue over red. And it'll make this color go to black, but it'll still register as quite high on the meter. And yeah, as we start getting a little bit louder, and as it starts settling into its groove and not throwing constant changes, because you have to either have a very open mix or throw a bunch of arrangement changes to get the novelty way the heck up. Again, density of this is your loudness, is your sonority. The range from top to bottom is novelty. And you can either do that by having loud stuff and then have some quiet stuff and then have some loud stuff, big changes in volume, or you can have the mix so open that it's making quiet sounds in the middle of the loud sounds. And that's also a way of doing it. And then hype is both of those things at once minus RMS. And it plays into the end score, and the end score is how we do all of this. So yeah, we've got a blue-green shade here. Actually, it's shading very much towards blue here because we've got this bright vocal and everything else dropped out a bit. But over here, it's a little bit redder. And yeah, you track the tone color. And in this case, I have no way of making it deal with color blindness. What with the new background on this, I have no way of dealing with color blindness at all, unfortunately. I need all three color channels to be able to do this. So, but then the information is also conveyed here. So on the slew meter, if you see your grayish colors over the blue, it's going to be slew brightness. If you see the grayish colors under the blue, it's going to be darkness. And yeah, our final thing has gone loud, so the sonority is close to louder than the blue range. And it's gone bright, so it's shaded to a bluish color. And that's kind of what that does. And here's some more of those little artifacts that I have still not been able to repair. It keeps throwing these little bits in there. And it made it to a AC, which is a higher rating than either the ZT Top or the Yes. But this has been a very big hit. AC. Let's look through some of this stuff, seeing as we don't actually have to worry about it because it's content ID. Want to hear something loud? What have we got that's good and loud? This is pretty loud. Yeah, here's how the loudness stuff works. Let me sneak one of these in while I'm at it. What would be good? Decide. Nowhere Man. Nowhere Man is loud and intense. And I've got Content ID on, so it's not going to nuke my stream off. And it's one of the top 10 hits. This started out very, very, very bright. Blue means bright. Blue means high frequencies. Then the band kicks in. And we've got a whole bunch of novelty. See how much the space it's taking up. So I could do that, and it will be very, very quiet and dull for almost all of it. It'll be a dark red color. This is a Beatles hit, so it's fun to see what that does. But say if you had this entire cloud down here, then making it louder would cause novelty to go up. But if it just stays there, or if you have it up here and then it suddenly drops down, then novelty will go up, because novelty is how much of this range have you covered. So right now we are 0 to 12 dB down. It's pretty accurately just covering this area up here, and this is blank. If it suddenly did stuff to fill in this area, novelty would go up. On the other hand, if it was all down here and wasn't doing anything up here, and then it jumped up there, novelty would go up. Novelty is how much of this space is being used up from top to bottom. That is why the Trevor Horn production had such high novelty, much higher than this. It's because it was doing something almost everywhere in this range, at almost all the time. The Beatles are going good and loud, and they've got a good range from 0 to 12 dB down, but that's about as far as it goes. So that is, looks like a solid AC there, and that's as far as the hype level goes. And novelty is typically louder than sonority the whole time. That's because rather than distorting, they are compressing. Rubber Soul, which is what this is off of, was the album where everything is compressed to hell. They compressed everything with really nice Fairchild compressors, sometimes multiple ones at once, because that was the old Bird's trick, is running multiple compressors into each other. I don't have any ABBA. Tell you what, I will show you one more thing, but first I will rate this. Nowhere Man was AC. Oh, I can show you a different Beatles that's completely, totally different. So this is off of Abbey Road. You can see how this does, in fact, use up all the dynamic range, but Abbey Road is on the TG12345 console, which doesn't sound the same as the old tube consoles. So Jeff Emmerich had a lot of trouble with it, and here's why. See what colors we have here on the old tube console? Nowhere Man is on the old EMI red console. They tended not to be very low frequency. Study the zero cross meter. See how loud everything is. A lot of it is also quite bright. The brightness is actually spiking the overslew quite a bit on Nowhere Man. You can see it showing up there. You can see the peaks are all from 12 dB and up, minus 12 and up. And you can see the zero cross is all around 200 Hertz, does not go into the lows at all. Now watch this. This is Abbey Road. This is the TG12345 console. Same band, same engineer, different console. The peaks are so unrestricted that their entire space is now -6 to -18. And their loudest peaks are showing up in the top just occasionally. There's a little room to like soft clip or limit this stuff, and it would make it louder and it would give you more novelty. And because it is bassier, you can see the low frequencies are going right down to 20 hertz here. The low frequencies have a bunch of sub 40 hertz content, although most of it is from 200 down to 40 hertz. Remember how Nowhere Man had lots of high frequency stuff and this doesn't? And Nowhere Man had a lot of zero cross stuff above 200 hertz, but this doesn't have any of that. They got bass, but they lost high frequencies and they lost the sound of excitement, even on a track that is clearly meant to sound exciting. And this can be fixed. This can be fixed in mastering. You can tweak any of these things. But look at the peaks. Our peaks go way higher than they used to. They're not clipped anymore, because if you clip a transistor console, it just hard clips. So they designed it not to do that. And since it doesn't soft clip all by itself, their entire sound got noticeably quieter to capture some of the louder peaks. This is basically why Jeff Emmerich thought that the TG12345 was not as good as the Red. He's very happy with the way that it sounded in the new bass and all that new stuff, but he was not happy with not being able to make stuff sound as exciting as the old tube stuff did. See, he's got overslews, just like on the other one. He's got overslews, but they are not saturated in any way. It's a cleanness that is not dissimilar to the sound of DAWs, where the Red console is a tube console, so everything about it is overdriving in various ways. Transformers are limiting the high frequency peaks. The tubes are clipping the volume peaks. And that's what you get. And this is, of course, the Dark Side of the Moon console. There are styles of music to which this works great. But, oh, one more thing. If you wanted to make a plugin, which I could potentially do, I'm going to need to make a plugin to do, console TG, if I want to do that. I have to start with the DAW and make it reproduce this behavior to make that work. Because I didn't have these tools when I was starting to work with this stuff. George Martin might have been happy with the quieter volume because he's a classical guy. And they would have been happy with the better bass, because this is distinctly better bass. This is exactly like the high-quality mid-70s hi-fi sound. At a stroke, they went from blaring 60s sound to super hi-fi, obviously better sound quality sound, but at a price. This whole cloud up here of the peaks in there were sitting at 0 to 6 dB. They lost like 6 dB of volume because their peaks were no longer being tube saturated anymore. And of course we can do that. Let's take a moment, label it. That was a DD. And it's updated the labeling. And fire up just a new thing I'm working on. This is not meant to be understandable. This is my little technique. And we're going to do a couple of little mastering tweaks while we're at it. I do have to move the selection to the beginning. And then we're going to start from there and start fiddling with this stuff. I can put out the zoom plugin though. Oh, do I have it set up correctly? I think I do. We can move those peaks higher up. That's a little bit more like what it was. We can goose the highs a little bit. And maybe pull our lows back a hair. And then if we do this, we've completely revamped the tone. With a plugin that I developed for my own use. And that's what it does. We have transformed Come Together from the TG12345 mix to a much more modern sounding mix that still basically has the same vibe. And it has increased the score that it produces largely because doing a modern presentation, it's useful to be able to use the full range of peaks. And it's still leaving a lot of space in there. Although there's multiple ways that I can do that. I could have also boosted the overall volume without cutting. What we're doing there is that zoom thing, which if you would like, I could put that out as a plugin. You want that next week? Or this coming Sunday? Zoom is basically a saturation plugin where I can squish this middle body stuff up here without taking off the top. We're not just clipping that, we're basically soft clipping it. It's basically like a variation on density. And you can hear little bursts of, you can't hear it that directly, but you can kind of hear the little bursts of it where the body of the track is more upfront and present. It also works in reverse. You can anti-zoom. That does this. This is anti-zoom. Mastering is using Sinew for this dark F and ratio thing. Anti-zoom is making stuff quieter, and it's a precursor to this mastering plugin. But I do believe I could put this out as it is. And it's like a variation. If you anti-zoom really, really hard, you're leaving the peaks where they are, but you're pulling the body of the sound way back. So you can do that with, for instance, the one that I just did. I think it came in at, I can just look for the, I did label that, so I should be able to just look for the, it was Nowhere Man. Oh, no, wait, I know. Yeah, I was looking for the gray dot, but all that means is that the it gets sorted into a different place, which is fine. That is fine. But yeah, the thing with that is that if we have something like this Nowhere Man here, and you do anti-zoom, it goes from starting out like this to becoming much quieter. doesn't sound good this way, but I'm exaggerating it so you can see what it does. And among the things that it has done when I kicked it in, and that's very strongly negative zoom. Oh, it's decided that it's amazing, though. It loved that. But it went from everything being packed together like this to wildly stretched out like this, which also involved doing a bunch of clipping the peaks, and in particular the high frequencies went from here to being wildly redistributed. It made some of the bits darker, and it made a lot of it way brighter, and so the tonal balance freaked out. That's because I had made it really exaggerated. If instead I took the same thing and did zoom slightly less exaggeratedly, it doesn't necessarily sound amazing. I'll bring in some of the sinew. But we have managed to expand it outwards a little bit. And we've taken some of the load of intensity off of it. I can probably... a little more. Shut it off. Run it a little bit while it's doing this, and then turn it on. Which actually made it decide, oh wow, this is amazing, so okay. But then if we exaggerate it like crazy, it starts getting kind of crackly, but our peak measurings just got really, really exaggerated from this, which was not particularly altered, to this, which is much more exaggerated. So that's what zoom is about doing, and it's also done similar things with the slew. I don't think large quantities of negative zoom are going to be helpful. It's going to sound like this. Too much negative zoom, not what you want in the slightest. It is very bright, it's wretched, it's ugly. You don't want any of that. Start bringing a little bit back, it's still pretty ugly. It's all crackly and stuff. But then if you go the opposite direction, everything is like modernly loudinated, and it's the opposite problem. This is basically nothing you can't do with like density. And you see how loud it has become, and also how obnoxious it has become. Go to the opposite extreme, and then we return to normalcy. So that's zoom for you. Yeah, you can have zoom. Zoom can be treated as a sort of weird sound effect. And this is what it does. Unlike just density, where you can only make it more intense, it's also designed so that you can lean stuff out more effectively than just using density alone. But it's using the same basic techniques. Yeah, it became an Oasis song. So let's see now. So I'll quit out of there. That definitely was not a legitimate measurement, that's for damn sure. And I do, in fact, have zoom. So if you would really like it, you can have zoom this upcoming weekend. It gives me time to deal with the meter a little bit more anyway. How's that sound? Somebody said, Horde Barrage said, yes, please. So you may have zoom. Good enough. And we'll go from there. It'll probably demo pretty well too, because one of the things I can do with it is just crank it up all the way and be like, here, you can do this. And I know people will want to do that. Not that they should, but they will want to do that. And on that note, I think we have successfully, that means I have successfully built the new version of Meter. On that note, I get to go and have dinner now, and then I'm going to go ahead to bed. But I'll see you folks later, and it's been fun spending what turned out to be, I guess, 2.5 hours, but finishing up the update to Meter. And I'll continue measuring songs, and by the time you see it, I should be able to label the scores with useful descriptions of them, because more than ever before, those scores now go to like song energy levels, where if you want like smooth and grooving, you target one of those scores, you make everything else be as maximum as it can be, but then you make sure that the final score goes to the energy level you're looking for, and that should optimize it for being a hit record at that desired energy level. Depart from the energy level and you're going to have a mismatch, and you'll probably do better to have it balanced incorrectly. But I mean, we'll see. In any case, talk to you later. Bye-bye.